Let me share with you the scripture reading this morning. You can find it in your bulletin. It's from the 118th chapter in Psalms, verses 1 through 5. This is our Palm Sunday reading for today. Oh, give thanks to God, who is good, whose steadfast love endures forever. Let Israel say, God's steadfast love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, God's steadfast love endures forever. Let those who honor God say, God's steadfast love endures forever. Out of my distress I called on God, and God answered me and set me in a holy place. You may not realize it, but you are in the midst of a celebrity this morning. Me. I didn't think you'd recognize it. I didn't think you'd realize it, so I thought I better tell you. Back in 6th grade, in South Hills Elementary School in Fort Worth, Texas, I, among a few others, were selected to be in the all-city choir. Yeah, I see your heads nodding. Yeah, you're impressed, I can tell. About 100 of us kids from around the city gathered one night. I don't know why I was chosen, but I was and I went. I remember that night as being a marvelous night in my life. I can't say anything for the parents who were there, but for my life it was good. I remember one of the songs that we sang was Fairest Lord Jesus. What a beautiful song. I remember that, strangely enough. And I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity because, see, that's the good news. The bad news, so to speak, is that was the end of my musical career. It's been downhill ever since. But it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy music, just not as a performer, as a singer or playing an instrument. I really do enjoy music. I enjoy listening to it, and over the years I've developed, I guess, a list of the songs that I thoroughly enjoy. Some of these songs are the ones that get your fingers drumming and your feet tapping, and they bring some energy, and especially if I'm driving down the road, especially by myself, I must admit, and I start getting kind of droopy-eyed and tired, I can turn on these songs and they just get me going. I sing to the top of my lungs, and thankfully Nancy doesn't have to put up with that. And I just get revived. What marvelous, magical songs those are. And then there's other songs that are more dramatic, more romantic possibly, that still have great meaning for me, and I enjoy those songs as well. But there are some songs, very few, but they are there, that when I hear them, they stop me cold. Because they touch me so deeply. It's almost like these songs were in my bones to begin with, in my heart, in my soul, in my spirit, just waiting to come out. And that glorious day when that singer or performer sang these songs, I realized, that's it. That's my song. And they have this power that literally, I can't sing them, because I get a lump in my throat. They have such meaning, such power. Pretty overwhelming, actually, but I just have to stop and just soak it all in and realize that's me. Now, maybe you have some songs like that. That when you hear them, and maybe it's been a year since you've heard them, or 5 years, or 10 years, and you hear them again, and all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah. Oh yeah. And maybe you too have to stop and just let them soak in once again. And maybe you too realize that same thing, that somewhere, somehow, they were already in your bones, already in your DNA, just waiting to be released, just waiting to come out. To me, music has that kind of power. I'm going to ask us to consider another piece of music today that might, but just might, have that kind of power as well. The one that we just read, the one that says, God's steadfast love endures forever. Now I'm going to invite you to keep these thoughts about this song in your mind, in your heart for a couple of moments, because I want to come back to it, but I want to share a story with you first. A number of years ago, I came across a book written by Elie Wiesel, the Jewish man who suffered through and somehow made it through the Holocaust. He wrote the book Night. It's a small book, but I came across it the other day at Barnes & Noble. You see, my copy is someplace in a book of boxes in a basement, and I have no clue where it is. But for some reason, that day when I was rummaging through the shelves in Barnes & Noble, it just kind of reached out and said, "Look at me again, will you?" And I did. So I sat down and leafed through some of the pages, and I didn't get very far. You see, that book, I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's Elie Wiesel's recounting of what happened in the Holocaust. At age 15, him and his family were ripped out of their village and taken into the concentration camps, where he would see his father die, where he would see his mother and little sister taken from him, all killed during that time. And he wrote about the evil, he wrote about the destruction. It's not an easy book to read at all. And he talks about the trauma he experienced. It's a deep, troubling book that almost never got published. You see, it started out when he came out from concentration camp. He was rescued. And he knew he had to write it. He would be asked later. He won the 1986 Nobel Peace Prize, and this book was just part of it. But he was asked, "Why did you write this book?" And he said, "I couldn't help it. I had to. For the voices who are dead and the voices who are alive, who survived." And in this book, it talks about the trauma. And it started out at 800 plus pages, written in Yiddish, his language. No publisher wanted to publish it. Not only because it was so long in Yiddish, not a big market for that, but even more frustratingly because nobody cared. When he wrote it, it had been too soon after the Holocaust for people to really understand just really what happened. As well as there were these thoughts, these feelings, these conversations that went along and said, the Holocaust never happened. Not really. It's just a myth. There are still those today that would say that, amazingly. But it did, of course. And millions of Jews were slaughtered. It's a hard book to read. But before you get to the point in the book where he's ripped out of his life, there's a fascinating conversation that happens when he's age 13, just a couple of years before that. He's sitting down, and Moshe, who is kind of a teacher in the village, an older man. He doesn't have any certificate, but he's always there sharing his thoughts. And a lot of people don't listen to him. Elie started listening to him. Moshe came up to him and asked him, "Why do you pray? When you cry?" Elie really didn't have an answer for him. All he knew was that there were those times in his heart that he knew he needed to cry. And what better time to cry than during prayer? He had to say to Moshe, "I don't know." Moshe then would ask the question a little bit later, "Why do you pray?" And Elie, again, couldn't really answer because that was such a strange question to him. He thought to himself, why do I pray? Why do I live? Why do I breathe? It was such a natural part of his life. He didn't really understand the question. He and Moshe would get to know each other better, and Moshe would be the one that would often say that it is through our questions that we connect deeper with God. It's not the answers. It's through our questions to God that we grow closer to God. And upon which Eli turned to Moshe and said, "Why do you pray?" And Moshe said, "I pray to the God within me, who gives me strength to ask Him the real questions." The real questions. I think we all have real questions, don't we? Not just the easy questions, not just the, oh gee whiz, this is what I like, this is what... The real questions that, again, are kind of in our bones, in our heart, in our soul, in our spirit. The real questions that maybe they might be the same as other people have sometimes, but we're the only one that can ask them. And we might not even know the words to say, but they are real questions. Deep questions. Moshe said it's his prayer to God that gives him the strength to ask God those real questions. Let me give you another scenario of a real question. You know, you may have been a little surprised when you read the bulletin that on today's scripture reading, it doesn't sound like a normal Palm Sunday traditional scripture, does it? But if we were to do that one today, we'd be talking about the parade that happened right outside of Jerusalem. That Jesus came in with his followers, and if you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you're going to find variances in the stories. Whether Jesus came in on a donkey and a colt, or a donkey or a foal, whether the palm branches were spread out upon the ground or just waved, whether the cloaks were put on the street or just on the donkey, there's variations, it doesn't matter. There was a parade, and Jesus and his followers were there. But on the other side of town, I think there was another parade. Not literally, but almost so. Because every day, if you went on that other side of town, you would see a parade of the Holy Roman Empire, where they would be marching through their soldiers with all their power, with all their might, armed, ready for battle. These soldiers were making sure that you knew that if you got in their way, if you disagreed with them, if you dared to raise a voice against the Roman Empire, you would cease to resist, most likely. That was that other parade going on, to show fear, to make anxiety, to make sure people knew who was in charge. But in this other parade, you see the one with Jesus and his followers, the people may have been asking the real question. Because they'd seen this other parade. And now they're seeing this one, and Jesus coming in, not with power, not with might, not with strength, not with legions of soldiers following him, but on a donkey, with unarmed followers. Talking about love, of all things. And the real question, I think, would have been, Jesus, who are you? Who is this God? Is this really the God that's going to bring justice when we look at this other parade and see what's going on? Is this the God that's really going to be with us in that valley of the shadow of death? Is this really someone we can be with and who will be with us? Those real questions. I think that's what would have been in their hearts and their minds and their soul and their spirit when they saw that other parade and then saw Jesus and his parade. And just wondering, is there anything here for me? Is there? Well, let's get back to that song. I say song because you understand that psalms were often sang or chanted. Especially when you start in this one section, Psalm 113 to 118. That's traditionally music that was celebrated during festivals, during the feasts, during Passover. Often they would start Passover with the psalm that is in 113, Oh Praise God. They would end with this one in 118, God's steadfast love endures forever. It was traditional. That was part of their faith journey. They sang it. They chanted it. It's even speculated, you'll love this, it's even speculated that at the Last Supper, because of the tradition during Passover, it's highly possible, even probable, that sometime during that gathering, they would have sung, "Oh, praise God." And they would have sung, "God's steadfast love endures forever." I don't know if that's true. But if they're following what they would typically do as Jews, this song may very well have been at that time. And see, they were songs. They were meant to be put to music. We don't have the music. Nobody recorded it, obviously. But it was there, and they sang it. They chanted it. It was part of their journey. And you see, I think the value of this was that why ask a real question to someone or something that you don't think will listen, that you don't think will hear, that you don't think will care? And somehow this foundation must have been there. God's steadfast love endures forever, and so of course we will ask God the real questions. Eli would end up asking God the real question. In the midst of his desperation, with death and destruction all around him, he would ask God, "Where is your justice?" Well, he was no doubt crying during his prayer, but now you see how it changed. His concern, his doubt, his question, his real question, "God, what is your justice?" Jesus would ask a real question. On the cross we're told, what did he say? my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's not a philosophical question. That's not a conversation. That's a man in anguish. That's a man asking a real question. Remember, we've talked about Habakkuk, the Old Testament prophet, that he comes to God with some real questions. He's mad at God. "God, why are you not listening? Why are you not taking care of this? Why do you let justice be perverted? I look around and see sorrow. I look around and see people being maimed and hurt, and you don't seem to care about it. Why?" And Habakkuk is modeling this same understanding that God accepts our questions, our real questions. I don't think I've ever seen it where God said, "Oh, now you need to be polite. You need to back up, because I don't think I can handle your anger. I don't think I can handle your frustration. I don't think I can handle what you are really feeling." Habakkuk models for us God, in essence, saying, in Habakkuk understanding, "Come on. Let's talk about this. If that's the way you feel, if this is your real question, then let's get it out." The real questions. And then there's this psalm. God's steadfast love endures forever. Do the real questions and this psalm intersect anywhere? Let me tell you a story about Anna Cooper. Anna Cooper was born in 1858 in North Carolina. She was born to a slave, her mother, but her father was the master. Somehow, some way, she escaped being killed early, being put in such a situation that she would never recover. Instead, she did recover. She did move forward. She ended up becoming highly educated. She would get her doctorate from the Sorbonne in France. She would become an instrument of a voice through her teachings, through her writings, through her speeches, through her voice. She would speak out against the evils of racism and sexism and classism, and people listened. She became one of the most inspiring and influential women of her era. But she was also a theologian. She came up with different images of God. One image was God as the divine spark. She didn't see God as maybe popular at that time, this white-haired, white-bearded person in a throne up in the sky. No. A divine spark within. But she also came up with a different image I thought was fascinating. God as the singing something. The singing something. Isn't that an odd phrase? I don't think she wanted to limit it. But the singing something. And she understood that we were not created in the image of God. We were created in the song of God. That song of God that had been placed inside us. That singing something had sung into our soul and given us a song to sing. And Anna Cooper would say it was that song that she heard, that she sung, that enabled her to find the courage to ask the real questions and to become that voice. God's steadfast love endures forever. I wonder if that song somehow is in our hearts, is in our bones, is in our spirit, in our soul. Somehow it's been placed there. You see, when I think about it, I don't think Jesus really wanted a parade that day. I really don't. It turned out, that's fine. But I think what Jesus really would have liked to have seen, because I'm convinced he had that song in his heart. God's steadfast love endures forever. And I wonder, I just have to wonder, instead of a parade, if what Jesus really would have liked to have seen would be the people to sing that song that the singing something had put in their hearts. God's steadfast love endures forever. Is that not a song that you can sing also? Amen.